V nadaljevanju bomo prisluhnili predavanju Mikkela Christoffersena z naslovom EBLIDA in novi evropski način knjižnic. Predavatelj je predsednik mednarodne organizacije EBLIDA in poseduje neprecenljive izkušnje na področju knjižnic, tako na Danskem kot v tujini. Po diplomi iz knjižnične in informacijske znanosti je služboval pri Danski agenciji za knjižnice in medije. Njegovo strokovno znanje zajema digitalno strategijo in e-izposojo. Aktivno je vpet v delo EBLIDE, NEIPL-a in IFLE. Predavanje bo potekalo v angliškem jeziku. We will listen to Mikkel Christoffersen's lecture entitled EBLIDA and the New European Way of Libraries. Mikkel is the president of the international organization EBLIDA. After graduating in library and information science, he worked at the Danish Agency for Libraries and Media. His expertise covers digital strategy and e-lending. He is actively involved in the work of EBLIDA, NEIPL and IFLA. Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. So, everybody wave. Hi. Thank you. Right, so thank you for the introduction, and thank you for allowing me to visit your beautiful country. I am old enough to have traveled in Yugoslavia, and only later did I realize that there were so many new countries I'd never visited and I realized I had only actually been in Croatia. So this is my first time, it's wonderful. I have met a lot of Slovenians though. Of course, I'm old friends with Alice, and my oldest daughter was a very talented kickboxer when she was a teenager. And I think there should have been a picture of kickboxing in the former presentation in the sports image, because it seems to be a little bit of a national sport. We traveled from international tournament to international tournament, and we learned, she met so many Slovenians, and we learned to really respect Slovenian athletes, because all of them are at least a little bit crazy, and some of them a lot. So this is sort of my impression of Slovenian people, apart from the wonderful work that you do in libraries, I should add. Right, so this is me. Of course, you already introduced me, but I should say that I am mostly known now for e-lending, digital lending, but I also had, before that, I had a time in the Danish Ministry for Culture, working with academic libraries, open access, digital culture, and then almost 11 years in Copenhagen libraries. So I have sort of a broad education in library issues. But as I said, I'm mostly known for digital lending. And you keep calling me the president of EBLIDA. I'm very honored. I am the director, and there is a president, Anna Winters from the Netherlands. But I mean, who's the president and who's the director? These are rather random titles. But I'm pretty sure that she will say that she's the president and I'm the director. So I'll get back to EBLIDA and what we do, but just a quick introduction here. We're the European the European Bureau of Library Information and Documentation Association. EBLIDA started in 1992 and is headquartered in The Hague. The last time I counted, we had almost 130 members across 34 European countries. And we advocate for libraries at the European level, share knowledge and network. There's a lot of things happening for libraries which is determined at the European level, and national associations, of course, do not usually work at the European level, so we need organizations to advocate for libraries whenever libraries come up in European policy and in wider cultural policy, and that's what we do. And you can also meet us here. I refuse to make an X, yes, good applause. Right, so what I want to go through today is a short story of hermit crabs. I'll take a look at democracy, because I've noticed that 2 years ago, all libraries wanted to talk about sustainability, climate action, but lately everybody wants to talk about democracy. I think there's a feeling that democracy is under threat. So we'll look at democracy. libraries in democracy, and of course, the European Union, what is the European Union doing, and what is EBLIDA doing. So, first the story of hermit crabs. This is a hermit crab. Now, what hermit crabs do is they ditch their shell, and then they go searching for another shell. And I had the feeling for a long time that especially public libraries were like a hermit crab, always looking for a new shell, always looking for a new identity. We are for sustainability and climate action. No, we are the new community centers. We are for democracies. One library in Denmark, you could come with your apples and have them juiced for some reason. And I had an American colleague who said that, well, you see, it's because of the internet. The internet traumatized libraries when it took away their monopoly on documents and information. And libraries are still traumatized and don't know what to do with themselves. So they get into all kinds of wrong things. And that's the old thought I had. But then things started happening a little bit. Notably, we started hearing about book bans for the first time since forever. And if you look at some of these bans, some of them are especially ironic. Because some of them are warnings about states that would ban books. So you ban the book, which is funny. There was the storm on the Capitol on January 6, 2020, feeded off by lies and more lies. Brexit in 2016 was also fueled by colossal lies, fake news, and then the library was suddenly found itself not only, at least in Europe, not only an institution in a battlefield, but actually the battle moved into the library when these drag queen story hours for kids, which is a tradition in some public libraries, were suddenly started meeting protests outside. And especially in America, but also in Ireland and Great Britain. And as I have a colleague who's counting them, and many thousand children have died from gun violence in America. There is yet to be one death from being read to by a drag queen in the library. But somehow this is perceived as a big threat. So, suddenly, I also realized democracy is actually being a thing, and it's just a thing we need to fight for again. So, I gave myself a short history lesson that I'll share with you. Now, democracy began about 500 before Christ in Athens, and it was in effect for less than 200 years. Then Alexander the Great rolled over Greece and abolished democracy, and the democracy was seen again in Greece again. Do you know when? 1974, which means I'm older than modern Greek democracy. So 250 years in their 2,500 long history. It's less than 10% they've actually had democracy. It was also not what we would call a democracy. It was restricted to basically the right citizens of Athens, which means men, people who had real estate and who actually lived in the city. Historians have come to the number of about 40,000 people were able to vote. It was also not representational. They didn't elect people to represent them. Rather, they would take up today's issue. People would show up, and they would have a lottery. Who gets to decide today? So there are some cases where one day they took one decision and they sent a naval expedition to Sicily, and then 2 days later it was another group of people, and they decided to call back the naval expedition. It didn't work too well. But it's the first democratic institution. You also need to trust that these people who are running the lottery and who's running the democracy actually is doing a good job. And the word democracy itself comes from demos and kratos, which means people and power. But they both have sort of a connotation of demos being not the elite, and kratos is a very sort of violent form of power, so actually it can also mean sort of violent dictatorship of the unwashed masses. And famous philosophers like Plato and Aristotle were actually not fans. Plato famously believed that the state should be run by a group of philosophers who guarded themselves. Demos also means we who live here. And we who live here need to defend our city. We need to defend our way of life. We need to defend democracy. This is the age where the Greek city-states would defend themselves by the free men having armor and weapons at home. When they were threatened, they would go out in a group, in the phalanx, which actually suppresses individuality, because riot police use the same formation today with the plastic shields. If one person thinks, I'm going to do something else, I'm too great for this, then the whole thing falls down. So the collective is stressed in this defense. And this guy is Aeschylus, the Greek tragedy poet, and this is what I discovered 30 seconds after I sent the presentation to the organizers. He lived from 525 to 456 before Christ in Greece. He's one of the greatest tragedy poets to have ever lived. But on his tombstone, it doesn't say, here lies Aeschylus, the greatest poet that ever lived. He was magnificent, and he wrote all these things. It says, basically, one who fought at Marathon. So, Aeschylus was not proud of the fact that he was a celebrated poet. He was proud of the fact that he participated in the defense of Greece and its democracy. See, that's the kind of dedication we need. Also from people who don't write tragedies necessarily. So, in the sense of people, the demos, there are two understandings now in modern European languages. My Slovenian is very bad, so I don't know how it is in Slovenian. However, there is a people who's an administrative unit. That's this kind of thing we get in demography. And then there is the of the people, a cultural trait, something that comes from the people. Those are the same words we have in folk dance and folklore and things like that. That would make very little sense to a Greek, because we are the ones who live here. I mean, what are you talking about? And democracy in the administrative sense is pretty easy. We go down and we vote, and that's over with. Of course, the US and the UK, they have these really weird systems where you can win the election but then lose it anyway. But it's still pretty easy administratively. But in the cultural sense, in the sense of defending where you are, taking good decision, having the responsibility for your fellow Greeks or Danes or Slovenians, you need to make, first of all, informed decision. So you need information, you need to be able to access it, and you need to be able to decode it. But in order to make wise decisions, you need empathy. You need to understand that there are other people than yourself. You need to work for the common good. And in that way, you need to expose yourself to culture. And you also need the ability to debate your ideas. And that's what libraries do, right? And this division also speaks to the duality of especially public libraries, that we are both a place for learning and information, but we are also a place for culture. And whenever we apply for projects or grants, we are also being penalized. We hurt a little bit under this division, because when we are working on the cultural front, we don't get the points for also being a learning and an information organization. And when we are promoting ourselves as a learning place somewhere to get information, we don't get points for the cultural systems. And we are a little bit divided. In many countries, we're divided between the Ministry for Culture and the Ministry for Education, Science, and that sort of thing. So, as I said, being able to debate is crucial for a democracy. And it must be open, and it must be safe environment. This is a Danish, he was not a philosopher, he was a theologian. And he was the first, at least in Denmark, to say that democracy is actually, it's a way of life. It's not just a way of governing, it's a way of life. And this sort of permeates everything that we do. And democracy is actually pretty rare. Like I said, Greece had it for less than 250 years in the 2500. Also, it has been called sort of an island in a stormy sea democracy, because the most important things in your life, your family, it's not a democracy, right? Your workplace, not a democracy. The library itself is not a democracy, which is ironic. The Danish Youth Council, that's an umbrella organization for every youth organization in Denmark. They have been working a lot with democracy. They did a report on the state of democracy, and then they've done annual reports ever since. And they distinguish between trust and self-confidence. In order to have a well-functioning democracy, you need to be able to trust the institution, the professions that work in the institutions. We have a little bit of a problem there because politicians and journalists are right down there with people who sell used cars. But at least librarians are in the top when it comes to trusted professions. You also need self-confidence. You need to feel that your voice matters, that your opinion matters, that you have the right to have an opinion and you can voice it freely. And it turns out that only half of Danish youth actually feel self-confident enough to participate in democracy. So even though we are known as a well-functioning democracy, half of our young people don't feel the necessary confidence in participating in democracy. So Aarhus Libraries, they've been working with this and they came up with 5 different parameters that you need to work with, like safe spaces, inclusion, facilitation, literature, and the exposure to culture. And where can libraries play a part here? It's a trick question. All of them, of course. This is what we do. So should the library be a neutral place? No. Yes, but no. Libraries are born from the very radical notion that information and culture should be free and available to all. Not everybody shares that vision. In fact, I'll give you a case from a Baltic state. I got this message in August. Hi, I need your advice. Okay. Then I can say it's a she. That's probably not a secret. After all, it is library, so it's probably a she. She sends me this email from a customer. I'm writing to your library to ask why books by this person, who is currently subject to sanctions by the European Union, are in the library's collection. Given that sanctions are often imposed for serious reason, how does this fit with the library's responsibility to provide an ethical... So he's asking in a very, very, very polite way, why do you have these Russian books on your shelves? So they analyze the books and they get that there is some Russian thinking there. And Russian thinking, by that she means that Russia should basically take over most of Europe. And if the rest of Europe doesn't like it, then too bad, we will do it by force. But it doesn't directly say, let's conquer Ukraine, let's kill a lot of people. And then she says, we have never taken an author's personality into an account when making decisions whether to buy a book or not. And then she says, I think we would have 3 books if we did. But in any case, of course they make choices. They choose the books for their library. So the question is, should our Baltic library have these Russian thinking books on their shelf, or should they remove them? And so now we will have a short election. Raise your hand if you believe that they should remove the books. Okay. Raise your hand if you think they should keep the books. Okay. Wonderful. I was a little bit wiffly-waffly in my own answers because I know Baltic people have a little bit of a strained relationship to Russia, let's say it like that. So I said, well, you can keep them and reference that the author is being sanctioned, or you can keep them on the shelf because this, among other things, is what separates you from Russia, that you don't suppress other views. Which is also, I think, your opinion, basically, putting words in your mouth. I was really surprised. I thought at least one of you wanted to get rid of the books. No? No, you're very principled. I like that. Okay. Where do we start? If libraries want to work with democracy, we need to work with promotion, access, and media literacy. Like I said, we need to find out the information, we need to be able to access it, and we need to be able to decode it. As for promotion, we have found that in digital, and I'm turning to digital because after the break I will talk about e-lending. There is a massive digital divide, even in the most advanced countries in the world. This is a study done by the Institute of Sociology at Copenhagen University. It has to do with who takes out children's books digitally. And the no college people, this is the gray line, and college-educated parents are the black line. And so you see here, That's about the same. Then COVID hits, and we have lockdowns. And the college-educated parents are a lot better to use the library's free option of children's books. Then the lockdown stops, and then you would think that the underprivileged, the families with less education would have learned about this offer and started to using it, but that's not what happens. What happens is that the college-educated families are a lot better at using this digital offer. Also in the second lockdown. So just making things available is not enough, especially digitally, because online digital, it's a huge galaxy. It's also a big black hole where things go to hide themselves and disappear. Now, access is the second problem, which is what we'll talk about after the break. Now, EBLIDA did this report on e-lending in Europe, and we found out the massive differences between e-lending in Europe. Now, Denmark now has 1.6 digital loans per citizen. Greece has 0.002. Portugal has 0. These are differences that we would not otherwise in the EU accept. This difference is bizarre. It aggravates the whole digital divide. It leaves kids without the possibility to read digitally. And as your Slovenia's own Dr. Kovac has made abundantly clear, we need people to read, we need people to learn to read, otherwise we are going to be the victims of artificial intelligence. We need to be able to read at a high level, and in order to think at a high level. I was so inspired by his presentations in Germany that I wrote a thing about it for our newsletter. But I probably don't have to tell you that it's so important that we teach our kids to read. And we probably need to do more in the digital realm. I get back to that. Anywho, the decoding part. Now, one example is fake news, right? Because if you can't learn to distinguish between fake and real news, we have a problem. Just ask any American. Now, the purpose of fake news is not to make you believe any crazy thing that this or that happened, or it's to make you disbelieve and not trust anything. It is to erode your ability to trust. Like I said, trust and self-confidence. If we erode the trust in everything, you don't believe anything. Like Steve Bannon, the Trump advisor, said, I'm sorry, just flood the zone with shit. It doesn't matter how stupid it is, it will make people stop believing in anything. This is from the EBLIDA conference in Lisbon earlier this year. This is an OCLC disinformation escape room. So you know escape rooms? This escape room is made so you have to decipher all the tools of fake news. There were some who never escaped, they're still there. Now, I was really inspired with fake news. I've always really been inspired by Singapore. In Singapore, they have what's called a total defense. They're a very small country, the size of Denmark, which is a lot bigger than Slovenia, but it's still a small country. So, and they have China and they have Malaysia in their backyard. They realize we can't have just a military defense. It makes no sense. So they have psychological defense, social defense, all sorts of things. And right here is the library, teaching people to distinguish between real and fake news. They are part of the defense. So they will have all these generals with all their stars and their uniforms, and on the right will sit a librarian. It's the SURE program, they call it, and the SURE stands for Source, Understand, Research, Evaluate. Singapore is also the first country who came up with a law against promoting fake news online. They've changed it a little bit lately, so now there are 6, but you can still see in the digital defense, you can still see the SURE system down here. So combating fake news is actually a part of their defense. And it's about high time. I don't know if you saw this news. These are American right-wing bloggers and podcasters, and it turned out they were all being paid by Russia. Of course, this is why I don't want to make an X, because this guy is also in the pocket of Russia. And Tucker Carlson is one of the most famous commentators. He used to be on Fox News. He has gone full Nazi now. He's just straight up defending Nazi Germany. So it's a scary time and a good time to be able to distinguish between real and fake news. Now, The EU, these are very boring, very text-heavy slides. I'm not going to read them. I thought that at some point they might be sent out, and then you can read them afterwards. But just very, very shortly, the EU started in 1951 as a coal and steel union. And the reason why they wanted to make a coal and steel union was that it's very difficult to start another world war if we are cooperating on steel and coal. So later it became an economic collaboration as well. Then it expanded with, among others, Denmark in 1973. The single market came in 1980. But the point is, it's still basically a coal and steel union. So the EU has legislative powers when it comes to these trade and production issues. Right? In the Maastricht Treaty from 1993, we established the European Union. Denmark voted no, just to do something exciting. Then the Eurozone came in 2002. We also voted no. And then came the enlargement, where, among others, Slovenia became part of the EU. And then the Lisbon Treaty. And now the EU is being really, really challenged on a lot of things, not only by Brexit, but by immigration, economic crisis, but the EU is doing a lot in culture. But it doesn't have the same powers in culture that it does with trade. So with trade, the EU can make trade agreements on part of Denmark and Slovenia and all other European countries. But when it comes to cultural policy, it only has what is called a supporting competence. It can't legislate. It can't legislate that Slovenian library users are supposed to have 3 digital loans or something like that. But it does do a lot of what we call soft law. They do work for cultural diversity. They have the Creative Europe program, the European Capitals of Culture. They work for multilingualism, digital cultural access, all these wonderful things, but it's only in a supporting role. Which gets us to the work plan for culture. These are the European strategic priorities from 24 to 29. Modern Green Deal, digital age, economy, a stronger Europe in the world, promoting a European way of life, and a new push for European democracy. So, sustainability, digital transformation, economy, European integration, European culture, and a new push for European democracy. Those are the Commission's priorities. And so they made a report, Culture and Democracy, the Evidence. And it turns out that people who participate in cultural activities will also be more likely to participate in civic activities. If you're interested in culture, you're probably also more interested in the society around you and in democracy. So, they thought to themselves, to promote an inclusive and engaged society and support the sustainability of the cultural sector, in the work plan for culture 23 to 26, they will put a special focus on the link between culture and democracy. And so through the lobbying powers of EBLIDA, which we're very proud of, and Public Libraries 2030, when they started this work plan for culture, which was ended up as a council resolution, this is one of the strongest documents the EU can make. They are saying all these wonderful things about culture as an infinite source of inspiration and innovation. It's an integral element in sustainable development. It's a grown significance in the EU values. It contributes to, if you contribute to culture and creative sectors, you increase employment. And all this is in the light of the Russian war against Ukraine, COVID-19, climate change, and digitization. So we need to strengthen culture. And within culture, they put in four programs: artists and cultural professionals, culture for the people, culture for the planet, and culture for co-creative partnerships. And this is where our lobbying powers took hold. So within this one, culture for the people, they made an actual program where libraries, for the first time in EU history, is mentioned explicitly. This is the first time that libraries are mentioned explicitly and has its own work plan. And this is where the so-called OMC group, which you and you are a part of. And the rationale for this OMS group is that libraries play a key role in Europe's democratic, social, cultural, and educational landscape at all levels. So this is the big, fat rubber stamp from the EU about the importance of libraries. And this OMC process has a mandate where the group and every European country can send up to 2 representatives. Slovenia has sent 2, good. Denmark sent 1, boo. The group will explore and identify the different dimensions and areas in which public libraries can play a societal role. For instance, the cultural and social dimensions of libraries as a community hub, 3rd place, democracy building, sustainable development, digital media, promoting literacy and reading. These should sound familiar by now. These are actually the EU Commission's priorities finding their way into libraries. And I thought we would have a quiz on the importance for you for these points, but the election process turned out to be more technically complicated, so you don't get a quiz now. You already won the first quiz, so that's fine. But? Oh yeah, okay, we could do that. Do we have the time? So who of you think that the cultural and social dimension of libraries as a community hub or 3rd place is the most important things that libraries do? Raise your hand. 6. Okay. Who thinks that democracy building, citizen engagement in libraries, and fighting disinformation is the most important things that libraries do? 11, 12? Okay. Who thinks that sustainable development, education, learning, inclusion, participation, resilience of community, and environmental issues is the most important thing? 2, 4, 5, also 12. Who thinks that digital media, green, and other forms of literacies are the most important things that libraries do? 8, 10. And who thinks that promoting literacy and reading, including promoting literature from other countries, is the one important thing? You can't, you know. Oh my God, you are split right down the middle. So that is either the sign that the Slovenian library sector is deeply schizophrenic, or that these are actually 5 very good points and they should all be looked at. Now, what the OMC group is actually doing now is, this is very German, I'm sorry, it's a German who's heading this subgroup. They have made like 9 categories, I believe, of what libraries do, and now they're getting best practice from all European countries in all these categories. So in the end, they will sit with possibly over 1,000 best practices. So you have your work cut out for you. Cool. I'll end up with what EBLIDA is doing. Now, this is EBLIDA. When you meet our webpage, we are not for profit, as I said. We are 4 people in the secretariat, but only 3 full-time equivalents. We do reports on e-lending, on library policy. We advocate, as I said, we lobby European divisions. We made this, which is outside along with the other European library associations. I'm very proud of this. It's one of the first things I did as a director. This is from Lisbon, our annual council. The conference was a lot bigger. And I've only been the director for a couple of months or half a year, but I've actually been a part of EBLIDA for many, many years. This is in Milan, 2013. Just to prove, I've been a part of the work for many years. This is where we fit in the larger sort of European association landscape organization. We are here, and we have a close strategic collaboration with NAPOL and PL 2030. But there's also LIBA for the research libraries, and there are these collaborations of national libraries and research libraries, of course, so it's a little bit confusing, and there's also, of course, IFLA. But just remember that EBLIDA is the only organization who lobby for libraries at the European level, very, very directly. And so this is our mission statement. We want to promote a sustainable society where citizens in Europe enjoy freedom of expression and free access to information, education, and culture, and engage libraries in maintaining a high level of democratic participation. Wonderful document. It's 6 pages. You can find it on our website. We also do European projects, for instance, the RLEU project, which is also sponsoring this conference, which is about how to make libraries better at applying for European grants and European funding. So there's been all these local events and seminars and webinars and training and all things, and if you go to the website, you will now find a workbook. So there's an actual workbook of how you can become better at getting European funding for what you do. We also just started this project called LIBRI, Library Bridges, because the libraries are also being acknowledged as one of the best institutions to make immigrants, third country nationals, blend into the society where they find themselves. So this is not the technical, once again, like I said, demos and the people. It's not the administrative legal things, because every European country has offices for that. This is blending into the culture of the country you come to and the way they do things where you find yourself. And libraries are exceptionally well placed to do that. So you see these European library partners that we work with, and the objective is to help develop and implement local strategies embedded in libraries and increase the effectiveness of the integration of third country nationals at regional and local level, particularly in France, Italy, Poland, Latvia, and Romania, but then to other countries as well. These are just the experimental countries. And then, and I'll end up here, we are getting very close to some major EU funding ourselves, EBLIDA. Nothing has been signed yet, so you can't tell anybody. Keep it here. But we are very close to getting a 4-year grant, becoming the EU's network representing libraries and library associations all over Europe. So it's a big rubber stamp in the neck of EBLIDA, that EBLIDA is the association, the organization that can represent libraries and library associations in Europe. And it's going to start with an awful lot of surveys about where associations find themselves. What are your challenges? What competences do you need? What are your issues? And then we'll get into librarians' competency, audience development, democracy building, sustainability, digital transformation, also cultural diplomacy, which once again should sound very familiar by now, but because these are once again the Commission's priorities dripping down to the libraries. It's 4 years, it will double our budget, and we will also have to do a ton of work. We are this close to signing. We are at this point where the European auditors, our application is 60 pages long, and it has 8 Excel sheets to top it off. And we're at the point where they're finding something on page 56 to see if it corresponds to what it says in Excel sheet 7, cell C2. It takes a while. But we did get, we are at that point, and you don't get to that point unless you are extremely close to getting the money. So we owe it all to you, because if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for the Slovenian Library Association, and the libraries supporting the Slovenian Library Associations, we would not be able to claim that we can, in fact, speak for the Library Association and represent the Library Association. And this is what the EU are saying now. Okay, we see that. So this is us working with the associations. The association work with the libraries, and the libraries work with the citizens. So this is the chain of influence with the EU commissions and how they sort of reach the end users in the end. Right, questions, comments, threats, love letters to me? And that was it.
Mikkel Christoffersen, thank you very much.